Welcome all to my paranormal closet where the stories and magic take place. Today's guest is a native West Virginian, born and raised in Marion County. As a young child, he experienced paranormal activity that would later pique his interest in all things strange and scary. This curiosity led him to paranormal investigating and founding WV Cryptids and Strange Encounters in 2017. Although his interviews have been about ghosts, UFOs, and other bizarre creatures, Bigfoot has been at the center of his focus and research. Please join me in welcoming Les Odell to today's show. Welcome, Les.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
I, too, have always been intrigued by the paranormal, UFOs, and Bigfoot. In fact, when I was writing my first book on true account hauntings, stories of UFO encounters and Bigfoot sightings in my county came in abundance, and they were so good that I added other strange phenomena to my book title's name so that I could include these fascinating stories. So let's dive right in. I'm assuming you believe that Bigfoot is real, correct?
Well, I don't know how to explain. I don't know how to. Let me just say that I'm more of a. Sometimes I'll say I'm a skeptic believer, and sometimes I'll tell people that I'm kind of like a proxy believer because my what belief I have hasn't come from experiences I've had. More, it comes from the interviews and the investigations I've done through other people. That's basically why I say a proxy believer. But I still have that skeptic side because I still wonder where they go, where they come from, why can't we find them, why can't we find this? Which I think any good investigator slash researchers should, in my opinion, still have that skeptic side to them.
Have you seen some really good evidence that makes you feel that way?
I have found what I would consider, they're not the greatest prints, but I have found prints that I really can't explain. I've seen some photos that were pretty interesting. I actually was one of the first. I was actually the first investigator on a property in Fayette County, West Virginia, where the fellow's sighting actually got a lot of attention. He ended up on finding Bigfoot. The new, when they redone, like brought it back together, the group back together. So he ended up on that. He ended up on Expedition Bigfoot. But the photo from that his sighting, to me, is pretty compelling. Yeah, and, a few other little things here and there. I've heard the howl that people talk about. I've heard it a couple times. It kind of shocked me the first time I heard it. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, I've not seen anything myself, but like I said, I've talked to a lot of people. I've had a couple really compelling stories that there was things with the sightings that really stuck out to me and made me think, hey, why, this is different. Why is it different? And led me down to investigate the folks or the sighting and talk to the folks. One of those was in Nicholas County, West Virginia, and it was outside of a little town called Drennan. And this guy called me. We found me on the internet first, and he messaged me, and then I said, "Hey, call me," because he kept, through our text messages or messenger messages, he's like, he would describe what he saw, but there was one thing he kept saying in his description that I just thought, why does he keep saying that? And I talked to his wife, and she would say the same thing. I just thought it was kind of odd, and it just caught my attention. But they both kept saying, whenever I'd ask them what did they see, because I'll do that. I'll talk to them and then ask them, and then try to come around about and ask again to get a description. Try to either bring out more information or see if I can catch sadly, try to catch somebody, whether there might be something fabricated there. But their story never changed, and they kept saying one thing, and it was, we don't remember seeing the feet. And I thought that was kind of strange. And so my son and I went and met this couple, and and through the phone calls and the messages, the guy, told me, he was adamant. He said it wasn't a bear. I know what a bear is. And he kept telling me, well, he first told me, he goes, I'm 63 years old. I've hunted all my life in West Virginia. I've been in the woods all my life. I know what a bear looks like. He said until, that day, he said there's no way you could tell me that Bigfoot exists in the world, let alone West Virginia. He said, but now you can't change my mind. He said, now you can't tell me any different.
Mm.
He said, I went to the location and he showed me where they were at, and they were driving down this road, and off to the side, or to the edge off the road, about if I remember right, it's 375 feet away, done all the measurements and stuff. He seen what he thought was a bear at first come out of this gravel lot. There was like a big pull off along the road. And this thing comes out in the middle of the road. And as they got closer, it stands up on 2 feet in the middle of the road. And he slows down because they're doing like 55 miles an hour because, 2-lane around here is like 55, most of them. And he comes to a stop. And this thing's standing in the middle of the road, and they're both looking at it. So that's after that, he's when he contacted me. And I went and interviewed him and his wife, and I separated them, interviewed her, interviewed him. Their stories were the same. I asked if she could sketch what she saw, and he's like, yeah, or she's like, yeah, absolutely, I can. And it's a rudimentary sketch, and so she sketched what she saw, and I carry these pictures. There are 4x4 pictures of like artist renderings of faces that people have seen over the years, and I've just put a collection of these together that I found on the internet. So I carry like 20 or 25 of them with me, and he went through them, and he actually picked this face, 4x4 card, and to me it's a really interesting or really intriguing match. I mean, when they're separated, but when I looked at her picture, with her drawing, you can see in her drawing she stops at the bottom of the page. She didn't show any feet, anything like below the knees, where the knees should be. So I'm looking at that, and I'm like, it popped in my head. I was like, hey, I want you to take my son. My son, was in his 20s, and I was like, stand him along the road, not in the road, but along the road where this creature was at, where you saw it, in relation to where you saw it. And I said, I want you to stop me in my car to where you would have been. And he did that. And I took my camera, my phone, and I held it at eye level, and I took a picture. And I got out and I showed him, and I held my phone up. I said, what do you notice in that picture? And I could see his face kind of get like drain and get white. And he goes, you can't see the feet. You can't see his feet. So that showed me that was something they didn't just make up. And it showed how close they were to this creature, which from the inside of the vehicle to my son was like 12 feet, I think it was. And then from the car, was like close to, I don't know, it was like 7 or 8 feet. So they were that close. And he's like, it wasn't bear. And I believe him. So I believe that what they saw, or what they told me they saw, they actually saw.
What do you think about this whole assumption that there's a possibility that they're coming through some kind of time travel or time warp that we're not able to see or catch? Or
in my heart of hearts, I want to be a flesh and blood animal. I really do, because that would make it so much easier. It really would. But yeah, whether what some people are seeing is something completely different than the paranormal side of that. Like, yeah, there have been footprints found. There have been, pictures taken. There have been, like in Pacific Northwest and other places where they claim they found nests and stuff like that. Now that's an animal. That's 100% an animal. Something that's leaving that evidence. But the strange parts of it, some of the stories people talk to you about that are extremely weird, it can't be an animal, And then, like I said, the skeptic side of me was like, if this is a flesh and blood animal, a completely flesh and blood animal, how come we haven't caught up with it? How come we can't find it? Which, it's cliche, but you say that it's a master of his domain is probably why we haven't found it. If you were looking into the animal part of it. But I've had stories that I've talked to people, and I'm not bashful or not. I won't shy away from the strange stuff. I've had people tell me weird stuff. For one, there's two of them that stick out very well to me. One, I can't remember exactly the area, but the guy said he was driving down. This is in a residential, like a small residential area. He's driving down the street. There's a street light, and the street light goes out, and then his car shuts off, and he couldn't get his car started. And as he's sitting there, he could hear and feel. Well, that's how he explained it to me. Like more feel this vibration, like it was like in his body in the car. And he sees this creature walk from one side of the road across the road off to the other side, and it didn't disappear into the woods or anything. He said it just disappeared, like completely. Yeah, and that's when. And then he told me, he said the lights come back on, his car would start, and that's not an animal. That's nothing flesh and blood. Or even if it is flesh and blood, if to me, if it's a
got some
interdimensional
kind of
thing,
like power of some sort. I know.
yeah, it's got something.
Yeah, I know people have. I've been finding that connection too. People have been kind of connecting them with UFO encounters, especially here in Sussex County. Way back in the 50s, there was an unexplained UFO encounter in a lake nearby here where it crashed. And shortly thereafter was one of our first Bigfoot sightings. So people started making that connection. Did they come down in that ship or not? So it makes you wonder if they've got these capabilities of making your car stop and shut off, or telepathically send messages to you. That I've heard some people say, are they from another planet, or are they coming from another time? Or it really does make you wonder.
I mean, I've taken, like I said, a few strangers, but I've really never had one that has been correlated or in connection with a UFO. I've never. I will be honest. I've never had that. As far as the mind speak, I've had a couple people say, and I don't know if they were actually having that happen or if it was actually their own flight, or whatever response in their heads, like, "Hey, we need you out of here," something like that. But yeah, something's, if these stories are true on both sides of that spectrum, something's going on. And for me, I need to investigate both, because if I can't, then I can't. As an investigator, you can't really make that separation if there is something different. It's hard to be. I mean, I know there are a lot of people out there that are one-sided, one way or the other, and that's fine. I mean, that's their prerogative. That's their. But I have seen, in many of the ones I've taken, it leans more towards some kind of animal. But I have taken some weird, strange things. But I've also looked into many other different weird, strange, creatures, and I've taken UFO accounts. I'm not the biggest fan of UFO stuff. I'll talk to people about it, and I'll take in reports, but paranormal, that kind of stuff, and Bigfoot stuff, cryptids, I enjoy it much more than I do UFOs. But I'll take it all. I'll listen to all of it. I mean, anybody wants to tell me something strange, and I think it has to do with, I enjoy the stories. I enjoy listening to the stories. I mean, when I grew up as a kid, I enjoyed my grandma telling me stories, folklore stories. I enjoyed my dad would tell us stories, and I tell stories to my kids. And I like to, and I like to keep those stories as much as I can, because now in this day and age, it just seems like it's becoming a lost art. That part of it, and I really enjoy it. And like, my kids probably get tired of me. Hey, hear this one, and tell this one, or I always tell people, like, how you get it. When they ask me, how'd you get into this, and I'll tell them my experience as a kid, and I've told that probably a couple hundred times or more in my life, or it's just in the past few years. But yeah, I just enjoy the stories a lot.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Well, do this research? Well, how long you've been doing it since 2017, I gather, right? The actual.
I started the page. What happened is, like I said, my experience as a kid is what got me started into it, or got me into it. As I grew up, I would listen to any story I could, read things like ghost stuff and things. And then my oldest son at the time was, because his mom and I had divorced, and I think he was probably around 12, somewhere in there, maybe 10 or 12. I can't remember which. And he's like, hey, we would talk about stuff. He's like, I would like to go ghost hunting. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to do that. And which I'd already done, I'd already would frequent, graveyards and stuff when I was younger and stuff. And so we started doing some things. We started a small group when he got a little bit older. Investigated homes. He was investigating homes when he was 15 years old. And
Right.
yeah, he was investigating right along with me with a couple other friends of mine. But then as his interest progressed, he got into listening to podcasts way before I did. And then he got into listening to like Sasquatch Chronicles and confessionals and stuff like that. And he's like, what do you think about Bigfoot, Dad? And I'm like, I've always had a back burner interest to it. I mean, I knew about the Patterson Gimlin film. I've heard the story. Like where I grew up, there was a local lore legend or whatever about the Granttown Goon, they called it. It was supposed to be like this hairy creature. This was from the 70s and stuff that roamed the coal fields and the cornfields outside of town. Well, if you look into the description of it, what people would talk about, it reminds you of what they would describe in the Momo case. The long hair on his face, had the red eyes and all this stuff. And, in the Momo case, there was even a UFO connection there, some people claim. But anyway, so I said, yeah, I like it. I'm into looking into it. So we talked about it and we would have conversations about it. And we're sitting one day and I looked at him and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could start a page or start something where people in West Virginia can come and share their stories completely free of any kind of,
Ridicule
or anything.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, he said that would be cool. So I got on Facebook and I started a page, and at first I put West Virginia cryptids and strange creatures, and that's what I had on there. And he's like, I don't know, Dad, don't sound right. So then we were talking, and I was like, well, how about West Virginia cryptids and strange encounters? And he's like, yeah, that sounds really good. That sounds good. It wasn't until like a year later or so that I'm actually doing something, with the page, that I noticed that if you would just use the first letters, it comes out West Virginia case. And it just didn't dawn on me until a year later. So we started the page. There were a few people that shared their story. At first, what I would do is I share like local cryptid stories or local, scary cryptids or ghost stories or something. I would share what I find online or read in books, and I'd share that. And then people started sending me things like, hey, this is what I experienced one time. And they send me ghost stories, and or send me UFO stories. And then people would send me Bigfoot stories. And I would put them on there. I'd ask them, hey, can you mind if I share it? And that just generated more of those to come in.
Sure. Yeah.
So the first like 6 months, you had like 200 people. That's all, maybe 200 people, maybe. And I posted one ghost story. It's called the Fifth Street, the Lady in White of the Fifth Street in Huntington, West Virginia. It's a local legend there. And for some reason, that is still one of the highest liked, shared, put everything on it, comment. And it makes its rounds every so often. So when I did that, it went from 200, then within like a week or so, it went to like a couple thousand. And then now, it's grown to 22,000 followers, like whatever you want to call it now on there. So that's just, that's where that got started and that led me into people calling me, telling me their stories, and then people say, "Hey, do you mind coming checking out where I live?" And I would go and look and
Yeah,
see.
yeah. One
Yeah, I
thing
go.
leads to another. That's kind of how I get people calling me about coming into their homes to do paranormal investigating. They'll
Yeah,
have heard about my books and that I do this sort of thing, and they'll go, I don't know if I got something going on, but it feels like there is. I would love for you guys to come and see. And it ends up leading to a paranormal investigation.
yeah,
So one word gets around to another, and before you
yeah.
know it, yeah. When you talk about cryptids, what other cryptids are there?
Um, I mean, you got Bigfoot. You
Hmm.
got one. I mean, the Flatwoods Monster. Some people consider it a cryptid, but it's more. It's more, in my opinion, and a lot of other opinions. It was probably more of a UFO related. Uh, then there's the Vegetable
What was
Man,
that?
which is
What was that one called, Wes?
Flatwoods Monster.
Flatwoods Monster. Oh, okay. I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's besides Mothman in West Virginia, it's probably the most one of the other most well known cryptid. Like I said, some people consider it called a cryptid, but it was um, more UFO related. What happened in 1952 on September 12th, I think it was. Uh, a, a group of young boys was playing in the local schoolyard, is playing football, and they saw a ball of fire go across the sky. I'm just going to give you a short, abbreviated version. They saw a ball of fire go
Sure.
across the sky. Noticed it crashed in a nearby farm, on a nearby farm. They went home. They gathered up their mother. At the time, there was 3 or 4 boys. They gathered up the two May brothers. I'm sorry, the May. Their last name was May. That's hard. I'm having a tongue tie here. The brothers, Freddie and Eddie May, got their mother, Kathleen, their cousin, Gene Lemon, and there, like I said, there's a couple other boys, and they decided they want to go investigate what this ball of fire was. And as they're heading up the road toward to where they seen this thing crash, one of them has a flashlight, looking around, and they run upon this, I guess you'd say, creature that emitted, it was making hissing noises, emitted like a nauseous gas. They said, but even the brothers that, which sadly Freddie passed away here a couple months ago, they said it wasn't a biological creature. What they seen was something that was mechanical. And so, but
Hmm.
the depiction you see, like if you would search up, Google Flatwoods Monster, what you see is not exactly what they saw. That was a sketch done by uh, a New York sketch artist when Kathleen May and Gene Lemon went to New York for an interview for a TV show, and the sketch artist kind of took liberty with it, I guess. Uh, there's a couple on, what's his name, Fred Frashino, I think his name is, done a book. This the sketch that's in that book is more in lines of what they saw. And I actually, by happenstance, here recently was doing some investigation or some investigating work at a local library on, because I like to get into the giants and stuff like that as well. Um, he said, he said, "What are you looking into?" And I said, "I'm looking into giants, local stories of giants." He said, "Well, you like weird stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "I'll tell you a weird story. You ever heard of the Flatwoods Monster?" I said, "Yeah, I know it very well." And he actually came forward. He's in his 70s. He came forward. He said, "I don't tell very many people." He said, "But I seen that thing that night. That Freddie and Eddie and them saw." He said, "I seen it." And he described it as the same as they did. It was a mechanical thing. He said it gave off illuminate, like a uh, somewhat of a sheening light, but it didn't illuminate. It just like kind of, almost, it was like it was reflecting light, or however you want to put it. But he said it was more mechanical. So that's one of them. It's like a really big one here in West Virginia. They have a museum for it and stuff like that. The
That's
other,
so strange.
yeah, the Vegetable Man is another one, which is very
Vegetable.
strange. Yeah, it's more again, they call it a cryptid, but it can fit. I think it's more alien related, mate, supposedly, because there was UFO sightings, and it was in 1968, I believe it was. if I'm not mistaken, in June of '68. Frederick Jennings, the fellow that how the story got started was from him. I don't know if you know who Gray Barker is. He's a well-known. He actually was. He's a well-known investigator here in West Virginia. He's long gone now, but he was right along in Point Pleasant with John Keel on occasions. They went back and forth investigating Mothman. Well, anyway, he investigated quite a bit of stuff, and Vesterland was one of them. It was here in the county I live in, and this Frederick Jennings was out hunting. He was groundhog hunting, what he was doing. They call woodchuck and whatever. And he's out groundhog hunting. Didn't shoot anything. It was hot, and he was supposedly walking back to his dad's house. Stopped to get a drink of water. Went to reach in his back pocket to grab his handkerchief to wipe his face off, and he hears this chattering, like, "Hey, I need your help," or something like that. And, I'm not here to harm you. And he hears this, and he says, like, he describes it as an exaggerated speed, like a record player at exaggerated speed. And then he noticed that he felt sharp pain in his arm that he had reached back for his handkerchief. And when he turned around, this thing was green, stocky, like a plant stalk looking. Let me show you something. See if I can pull this picture down.
It's so strange. I've never heard this before.
You see that?
Yes, I can.
That's an artist rendering from a buddy, Mark Randall. That's Vegetable Man. Frederick Jennings said that the eyes were red and yellow, or orange and yellow, was swirling, and this thing had fingers that had spikes on it, and were embedded in his arm, drawing blood from his arm. And it told him that, "Hey, don't worry about it. I'm here. I just need your help. I won't harm you," and whatnot, something like that. And then a few seconds, I think he said it was a minute or so, it finally let go, pulled his thing, and bounded in leaps and bounds of like 20 to 25 feet, and was over and gone, and went up over the hill and disappeared. But then there were other people who reported UFO sightings around that same time. So that's another one. Then we have like the river monster stuff that the people talk about, the agua or agua, however you want to pronounce it. It's a large turtle. Some people say it has two heads with a tail of 15 feet long. It's just different little ones that are around. And then we got Bigfoot that has gained local names, like the Grandtown Goon that I talked about, Polk Gap Monster, the Grafton Monster, things like that.
These are all renditions of Bigfoot?
I believe most of them are. The only strange one would be the Grafton Monster. Was sighted in 1964 in Grafton, West Virginia, by I'm drawing a blank on his name. But anyway, he was a journalist for a local newspaper, and he was coming down this road along the river, and he sees what he states is a hulking monster or hulking beast, and he describes it as being whitey silver, slick, almost like a seal, the coat almost like a seal, standing along the road, and it had no head. But most people believe, even Gray Barker believes, when he investigated, it wasn't that it didn't have a head. Its head hung really low below its shoulders, and he's seen this thing, and it run off down back toward the river. Him and his two friends went back to try to find evidence, and the only thing they found was, no, they didn't find any tracks, but they found where the grass had been pushed down, and they would hear strange whistling noises coming from the river. He wrote about it in the newspaper, and it set off a mad frenzy of a monster hunt. There were people coming from all over the place, cars lining up, literally what you would see on TV with pitchforks and everything. These teenagers are lining their cars up hunting for this monster. But it's right along with one of the most famous ones here in West Virginia, like with Braxton County Monster, Flatwoods Monster. They're the same thing, and Mothman. So,
Wow. Do you believe these creatures that are renditions of Bigfoot, so to speak, do you think they climb trees? I'm only asking because the Florida Keys has their Bigfoot version, and it's known as the skunk ape.
skunk.
And I recently interviewed the well-known skunk ape researcher Dave Shealy, who
Right.
lives actually in the Everglades, and he says that those skunk apes make their nests
Right.
in the trees.
But a lot of the sightings and stuff of the skunk ape um, are much smaller than what you hear
Yeah,
in other areas. Um, I
yeah,
haven't taken any reports of any being in the trees. I mean, I know a lot of people have, but and again, that's where my skeptical side comes in, especially when something is supposed. I mean, the skunk ape, yeah, and other ones that are in the southeast or the southwest are generally smaller. But when you have something that people are describing as 7 to 8 feet tall, weighing,
mm,
which if I forget what the name is, there's kind of a formula that would tell you. Mason. Night, Bubby. That's my son telling me good night.
okay.
Okay. Um, there's a formula, and I'm sorry, I lost your train of thought. Based on the height, you can kind of get the weight. So 7 to 8 feet tall. Some people can believe it could be anywhere 800 to 1,000 pounds. I don't feel that 800 to 1,000 pound animal is going to be in majority of the trees, especially not way up. Now some of them, yeah, maybe lower, but not up. I mean, I just don't feel the trees would hold it. So yeah, I think it's a little different just depending on the area where you're at.
Why do you believe that some of them are associated with a stench while there are others there's nothing? I mean, the skunk ape, they liken it to the smell of a skunk. And here in Sussex County, some of the sightings have had a really foul smell while
Mhm.
others didn't smell anything.
Well, I just base that on, I'll just say what some people theorize. Some people think that their smell comes from just their environment. They're dirty, they're nasty. Bears stink. I mean, you get a bear that's been out and wallowing around, they stink. Other people think if they are a primate, they may be like gorillas. Gorillas have a gland that's in their armpit that they can actually basically turn on and off when they want, as to put out this smell, this musk or something, in a defensive mode. So maybe that's a possibility. But
Or
you know,
BO.
yeah, it could
Everybody's
be,
BO.
just stink, just dirty, yeah.
Mm,
Um, I mean, you get an animal out there rolling around and sweating, stinking, or whatever or sweating and getting in and all kind of nasty stuff. Yeah, it could just smell.
true.
Yeah.
But you were talking earlier about Gimlin and Patterson, the duo who captured the most famous film footage of Bigfoot back
Hmm.
in '67. What do you make of that footage?
Earlier versions, when you look at it, like before the whole stabilization, the whole 4K thing, um, I was up. It was a toss up. It could have been somebody in a suit. It couldn't. Maybe it was one. Now, when you see the 4K and you can see what they call the bulge in the leg, the rupture of the muscle in this leg, you actually see it move. You can actually see um, other muscle flexion in its back and in its glutes and the most famous, they say that the breast move. You can see that in this new field or new footage when they've been stabilized and it's up in 4K. And I've heard that they've done it in like 8K or something like that, but I haven't seen that yet. With that all being said, for me it's hard to debunk that that's an animal. Um, I don't really know if it's a man I don't think it's a man in a suit. The arms are long, which, if you watch how they move, there's actually movement in the wrist. Well, Bob Hieronymus had claimed he had a suit with arm extensions. When the arm extensions back then, you didn't have any kind of movement in the wrist. There wasn't really any animatronics like that, that could be today.
Right.
So I I believe it. that it's probably still one of the best pieces of evidence. But again, I still have that side. Why haven't we seen any more? Why haven't we, found this? Which there are people like, hey, yeah, we found a body, but I don't know. It's
Honest to
just
goodness,
kind
if somebody found a
of, yeah.
body, don't you think that they would hang on to that and they would bring it out and get the media attention just to focus on, look what we found, because it would be worth millions. I mean,
Well,
seriously, when you think about it.
some couple of this. Well, see, there's a whole thing about Mount St. Helens. Um, People say no, it's a conspiracy theory. There have been soldiers come forth and said when Mount St. Helens erupted after the aftermath of Mount St. Helens, when the military come in,
Yeah.
the National Guard stuff come in, they found bodies. They found burn up bodies. They found injured ones. There was one guy that I forget I think what podcast was on or something I was listening to, but he was in the National Guard or Army or whichever, and he was taken to this tent, and he was told before he went in the tent, what you see in here, you're not to speak of. You're not to tell anybody. But he didn't until after he was long out of the military. And he said he saw these things on tables like gurneys. With the medical staff was you know taking care of them, had IVs in them and stuff like that. Um, but then there's other stories where people have said they've shot them, and then these things wander off and they're never found. Even in Then there's people who's like, hey, yeah, I've seen a body. They go back to get it, it's gone. Some people, there's
Mm.
been stories where one has been shot or something, or somehow killed, and they've went back to get the body. Because you get something out there that weighs 1,000 pounds, you're not going to drag it home, unless you take it.
Mm.
Sadly, you have to quarter it up and take it out. But they would go get a vehicle or something to kick this thing out of there. And a couple of the stories I've heard, they walk up when they go to approach this body where it was at. It's either gone or they've seen other ones carrying the body off. Um, as far as like natural reasons why we can't find a body, it's I think the intelligence is there enough to where they know to go somewhere where they're not going to be found. It's a possibility.
So do you think they bury? Do they bury their dead? Maybe just like people
That's what I
do.
was getting ready. Yeah, I was getting ready to say that, and I think there's a possibility. Like I said, if they are an intelligent race, which may not be a primate like a gorilla or something, maybe they're more of a relic hominid or relic human, then maybe they do have that social structure where they do bury their dead and stuff like that. I mean, and again, like I said, with the naturally, where most of these things are seen, the majority of the sightings, the big number of sightings, are in areas where the soil's damp, wet, acidic, pine trees, for that kind of forest. The bodies don't last long. They're gone within days to maybe a week or two. Uh, Whether it's
Other
from
animal scavengers and that
other
sort of
animal
thing too.
scavenging, yeah, and so it's like I said, it's all theories, and it's just based on theories, and I got a couple of theories of my own that follow along with those, and like I said, I just in my heart I wish I want it to be an animal, you know, because it would be so much easier if it is an animal to accept, I guess you'd say, or however you want to put that.
Any of your theories that you haven't told us about that you would like to share?
Um, I can't say I mean, it's kind of a theory, um, but I've heard other people say it now as well. I talked to somebody several years ago about it. What if some of the sightings that, like I said, these weird sightings out here where they talk about the red eyes and stuff like that, what if that's not really even a creature, maybe, a Bigfoot creature? What if that's some kind of new tech that military has, or something like that? The night vision, the suit's like a ghillie suit, the night vision's like night vision, or the red eyes is night vision, and this suit can, because you hear about them cloaking or disappearing. Maybe I don't know. I don't necessarily wholeheartedly believe that. I just thought it was pretty cool to bring that up one time on a podcast that maybe these suits can be maybe there's some kind of um,
Armor,
fiber optic type stuff that can actually,
or hunters use
you
stuff to camouflage. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
yeah. I mean, it could, yeah. It just some weird stuff that I've talked, when a bunch of us get together, we BS about it, and not necessarily
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
believe
yeah.
that, but it's you mention something like that, and you'll see guys, people's always like, oh, yeah, that, hey, yeah,
What
man,
if?
you know, yeah. So I can't say it's a theory. It's just some discussion that I've brought up, with a couple people, and just to bring it up. Hey, well, maybe it's technology. Maybe it's what some people are
Yeah.
seeing. It's just some kind of, maybe it's military out there doing drills and they got new technology they're checking out. The suit might be fiber optic and they reflect light, and that's why they seem to disappear. Maybe the eyes that they're seeing are not actually eyes that are glowing. Maybe that's some type of night vision, IR night, and I just,
Or
I see
maybe
that.
they are coming from a totally different dimension.
It may
Maybe.
be. It's possible. It's
You
possible.
never know. I mean, I imagine science and scientists don't get involved in the whole Bigfoot phenomena for fear of being ridiculed themselves. So
Yeah, I mean,
scientists have a certain time.
a lot of them are, but there are a lot of scientists that are into it, that are actually out there. Some that are, well known.
Oh, really?
Jeff Meldrum's one of them, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. But there are other ones out there. A friend of mine, Amy Boo, she has a called Zoo Book Project. She has scientists and anthropologists and stuff that help whenever there's sightings, and they roundtable stuff and investigate in a scientific way. Um, so yeah, there's people out there, maybe not big name people, as many as big name people as what you would think, in the public eye. But yeah, there are scientists that are still looking into it.
Well, that's good. I think that there should be.
Yeah,
How are you with Bigfoot trivia?
I'm gonna tell you straight up, I'm not one that studies most of the history of Bigfoot, so probably not the greatest. Um,
You want to
So
have some
I ain't
fun
gonna
with some of
lie.
the
I
stuff
ain't
I
gonna lie,
found?
because here's what I'll preface that with. Whenever people look at me and ask me something and they say something about researcher, I'm one of the first to tell them I'm not a researcher. Okay, I'm an investigator. I investigate when people come out and when people contact me to come out and check out their stuff. I look for things, try to figure out what's happening. Is there something here? Is there trace evidence? And if there's not, I try to help people understand what could have happened or what's not happening.
Mm.
I I don't dive real hard into the history. I mean, I know where the Bigfoot terminology name basically come from. I know Patterson Gimlin film. I know a couple other little things, but I really don't know a bunch. I ain't gonna lie to you about that.
I didn't either. I was just kind of like Googling to find out. Did you know that there's actually a state that has not had a Bigfoot sighting? It's either Hawaii, Delaware, or Rhode Island. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's one of
Hawaii,
those three, and I couldn't
Hawaii.
find which one it was. It's Hawaii?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, see, you knew that, and I didn't know that.
yeah, it's Hawaii. It's the only state not.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, see, I didn't know that. I learned something now myself. And then I was Googling, they had some really funny things, like one of the most famous television Yetis appeared in 1964's classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. What was his name? Was it Hermie, Sam, or Bumble?
Bumble.
You you got it. That's right. Then there was this Pangbush Buddhist monastery contend that they have a part of a Yeti. Hand, skull, scalp. Which one? You say scalp?
Mm-hmm.
And I found out online that it was hand.
Well, maybe I'm thinking there's two of them. There's one, the scalp. I know the scalp, but I don't remember if it's the Buddhist or if that is in Tibetan but yeah, there is a scalp. There was a guy.
Wow.
I don't know about a monastery having a hand, but I do remember there was a guy came forward with a hand claiming it was a Yeti hand, and he was trying to like sell it for like a large amount of money. But I do know about the scalp, yeah. But I don't remember. I don't know if that's exactly the location, but I do know it's in like in Tibet or somewhere over in there.
That would be interesting if there's one of each, right?
Yeah.
What animal is frequently mistaken for a Bigfoot or Yeti? Brown bears, yaks, or orangutans?
Bears. It's always a bear.
Oh, see, and I got the answer orangutan. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's always a bear.
I've actually heard both,
Yeah.
believe it or not. I've heard both, especially in the Florida area, them
Yeah.
getting recognized as orangutans.
Yeah, the Florida
So,
area, yeah. But any place else, first thing they tell you have a mistaken identity was it was a bear.
well, that kind of makes sense too for the woods and forestry and all that, you know.
Yeah.
Here's another one that's really fun. What Disney Pixar film has a Yeti cameo? Cars, Finding Nemo, or Monsters Inc.?
Monsters Inc.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, why don't you go and tell the listeners how they could find you if they have their own Bigfoot story that they want you to hear about, or if they want you to come and investigate something nearby?
You can usually just message me straight on Facebook. You can on WV, not West Virginia. Don't put West Virginia. Put WV, Cryptids and Strange Encounters. Or you can email me at. Let me make sure I get this one right because I got like 2 emails or 3 emails. WVCase304 at yahoo.com. You can email me there. Or you just look. Yeah.
WBCase304 at yahoo.com.
Yeah, 304 is the area code for most of West Virginia. So,
Okay.
or you can just find me. As far as I know, I'm the only Les Odell in West Virginia. If you look me up, if you put Les
Oh,
Odell and Bigfoot in West Virginia, you'll find me.
how convenient.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and opening up and sharing your stories of Bigfoot and now these other cryptids that I wasn't even aware of. I appreciate it.
you're welcome. You're welcome. I enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to you listeners, if you like listening to this week's episode and you're into all things paranormal, check out my other show, Eleanor Wagner's Creepin' It Real podcast, out of the Coast to Coast Entertainment Network, which is available wherever you get your podcasts, streamed directly through my Eleanor Wagner YouTube page. And if any of you are interested in reading any of my books, you can find them on Amazon, or you can get signed copies directly through me at authoreleanorwagner@gmail.com. I write about the history of the town and location, add the paranormal story to the mix, and finish it all off with photos and evidence. Everybody loves a good ghost story, but there's nothing better than a true ghost story. So check it out, authoreleanorwagner@gmail.com. And I hope you'll stay a while and listen as Silent Crafter's Stranger Part 2 takes us out of the show. Good night, Les, and thank you.
Thank you. Good night.